This is an interview with John Brundage, Friday, September 13th, 2002, approximately 9 a.m. At the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. The interviewer is Michael Russert. Could you tell me your full name, your place, and date of birth, please?
John G. Brundage, born in Endicott, New York, January 21st, 1923.
What was your education prior to the war, to your military service?
I graduated from high school, Saratoga High School, then went into the Marine Corps that following September.
Did you work at all prior to military service?
Prior to that, I had worked for the Liquid Drug Company for approximately 3 years in the soda fountain department, and did odd jobs around town trying to make a living at that time.
Where were you and what do you remember about when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor was on a Sunday morning when we received the information, and I was with just completing boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina, in the Marine Corps, and the reaction was mainly, I guess, was where in the heck is Pearl Harbor? Immediately the base went into heavy security. Still everybody was in a daze trying to figure out what was going on, what they talking about, and dream or what. But it was a big surprise to everybody.
So when did you enlist?
I enlisted October 8th, 1941, about 2 months before Pearl Harbor.
Okay. Why don't you tell us then, why did you join the Marines, and why did you join when you did?
Well, I guess I joined why I did because I had always had a fascination for the Marine Corps. Jobs were tough, jobs were scarce, and I guess to impress my girlfriend.
Okay, then why don't you tell us when did you go to boot camp and where, and just start telling us your story.
I enlisted in Albany, New York, and at that time there was no recruiting depot sections here, and I took the physical exam down there, and we were shipped by train to Parris Island, South Carolina. That was down there approximately 8 months when, 4 months, I'm sorry, when the, back to 2 months, when the Marine Corps group completed a boot camp a little ahead of time because of Pearl Harbor, and at that point we were divided up into different further schooling sections. I was assigned to water purification distillation unit in Quantico, Virginia. I spent approximately 3 months there, and then was transferred to what we called New River. It was a base formation for the 1st Marine Division was being brought together. At that point, I was assigned to the combat engineers units, and shortly after that we were transferred to Norfolk, Virginia, and shipped overseas. We left about, I think it was Mother's Day in 1942, from Norfolk, and destination unknown. We traveled several days through the Panama Canal and then into the Pacific Ocean for destination of, at that time we didn't know where it was, but it was Wellington, New Zealand. And from there on it was all downhill.
What did you do in New Zealand? Was it a training base for more training, or?
New Zealand was basically, apparently it was winter time there because it was cold, rainy, wet all the time. And we were only there a short period of time. But our main function was to unload and reload all the ships in the convoy so that they would be what they called combat ready. We had the troop ships were converted into extra supplies, material, etc. And it was just a rearranging of all our supplies and everything so we could have, when we needed them, where we were and why we had to have them at that point. Each ship was, the fleet area was composed of something that would supply the unit most efficient, and what they call the triangle division, so that you had your combat infantry, your artillery, and your raiders, engineers, and so forth. At that point, we were only in New Zealand approximately, I guess, maybe a month at the most. At that point, we sailed from there, destination unknown, and we were at sea for several days before they gathered us on deck and told us that we were going to attack the Japanese on an island called Guadalcanal. Of course, everybody's reaction was, "Guada what?" And from shortly after that, on August the 7th, 1942, was the big day for the initial landing on the canal. Pardon me. We were on the canal I was on the canal for 4 months. I made the initial landing on August 7th, got out of there they tell me December 9th, and we left, I think it was the 13th. Our group stayed behind 1 week to pick up supplies that we were going to take with us.
Were you in the first wave?
We were in the first wave, correct.
How did you get ashore? What kind of boats did you use?
We went over what they call the cargo nets with no gangplanks and all. You went down the rope ladders into Higgins boats, and ours was the first original units, because the bow on the boat was like a Boston whaler. You went over the side when you were getting out of there to make your landing. Some of them had the ramps that dropped down in the beginning in the front, but we weren't that fortunate. So we had to wade through the water up to our waist and onto the sandy beaches.
Was there any opposition to your landing?
There was no opposition. It was, you're feeling, you don't know what you're feeling when you go in, because there had been a lot of gunfire and so forth, softening up the beaches and from the Navy, and you didn't know what to expect, and I guess you're a little bit surprised or a little bit disappointed that there wasn't somebody come charging across the beach at you or something. So we landed in a grove of coconut palms, which was part of the Naval Brothers plantation crop, and we just more or less took up positions, defensive positions at that point, till we could understand what was going on. That afternoon, we received our baptism of fire from the air, and the Japanese had already notified their group at Bougainville, and they had sent down, I think it was about 40 bomber and strafer planes. So it was kind of a hectic day, and a day that you were thoroughly confused. You had no idea what was going to happen, or what you were going to do, or anything. And the first night we moved off from the beach inland, very short distance, until the next day when the airport was right in that vicinity, and we and the other boys moved right across the airport and took up the whole unit. Nothing, it didn't seem to have any offensive or any resistance at all. And it was kind of after you're watching all the John Wayne movies and everything, I think we expected more, and a little disappointed. But after that, the going got rough. The Japanese regrouped. The biggest group of Japanese on the island were construction workers. However, there was no hesitation in bringing in troops from the other islands in their support. So it was, from then on down, the next 4 months was continually upsetting. We had very short periods of time that there wasn't something going on. There was tremendous sea battles constantly. There was always a bombing raids continuing. We had one fellow they called, they've been called Washing Machine Charlie. They've been called One Long Louis and all this stuff. But Louis was in the mountains with one artillery piece. The bomber used to fly around at night, and he's just enough to annoy you and keep you on foxholes, drop one lousy bomb and take off. They're never doing very much damage. During the, I think it was October 13th, the Japanese were making a futile attempt to retake the island, and sat offshore at approximately, if I remember correctly, somewhere around 11 o'clock that night. All hell broke loose when they started shelling the beaches, shelling the areas. And we had a continuous bombardment on us from that evening into the next day. And when you dared get out of the foxholes to look around, it was absolutely devastation. You can't explain how, there was just nothing there. Everything was down. Trees were down. Big pockmarked holes where bombs and shells had landed. Our area was completely exterminated. There was just nothing. And after surviving that, I guess we figured that if you can get through that way, you can get through anything. Your nerves were, if you had any left at that point, was tuned to the point where you were starting to get careless now, because if you could hear the bomb coming down or the shell coming in, you were okay. You knew you had it made, because the ones that got you, the ones you never heard. And the Navy at that point, the American Navy had taken off and left us there stranded in the first few days of our original landing. And they had been warned that the Japanese fleet was approaching them, and they took off with most of our equipment. We never had a chance to get aboard from the ships onto the beaches. Food supply was very, very short. If you liked rice with fish heads in it, fine. That was a captured Japanese food, but it wasn't too appetizing. Meals were down to pretty much K rations to C rations, and it was the island was actually called Starvation Island for a point there, and we learned to do with very, very little food, supplies, ammunition, the whole thing. So all in all, Guadalcanal was a test of nerves and stamina and stupidity, I guess.
Why would you say that?
On our part, I think we were stupid for being there in the first place, I guess. But it was a necessary battle occupation, because the Japanese, learned later, the Japanese were poised to move in and take over New Zealand and Australia. The Australian troops were up in New Guinea, so Australia was pretty well defenseless. New Zealand was basically the same idea. And if it had not been from the 1st Marine Division moving into Guadalcanal, undoubtedly the Japanese would have taken that and used it as a jumping off place for invasion of the other two countries. We have
What was daily life there like there with the elements, the rain and so on? What kind of things did you encounter?
weather-wise, if you moved off of the beach areas, plantation areas, into the jungles, which we were a lot of it, jungles surrounded the airport, they were always damp, always, you felt like a heavy dew all the time. Believe it or not, nights were cold from being wet all day and cooling breezes would chill you. Days were hot, mosquitoes were ferocious. Everybody came down with malaria. You had jungle rat, dysentery.
Was there medical treatment available for these things?
Medical treatment was, they were giving us Atabrin for the malaria, but Atabrin, they tell us, was for a preventive, and we had already had it, so you really should have been giving us quinine, and we eventually ended up with that quinine tablet. But still, it was too late to a lot of the people because they'd already developed the case and there was nothing to get. Malaria, the way that it affected us was that you'd go from an extremely hot, feverish conditions to cold, chilling conditions. And it got to the point where you didn't know whether to worry about the malaria or worry about the damn jabs, you know. And but jungle rat, it was open festering sores, and you just wore as little bit of clothing or uniforms as you possibly could because they kept irritating the wounds.
Was there any treatment for that was given to you?
They were, the medic, corpsmen, God bless the corpsmen, were treating with, I think it was called methylene blue or something like this. It was a blue liquid, and it got to the point where they were just passing it out in bottles, and the guys were treating each other because they just couldn't keep up with the group itself. And it got so bad in some of the boys that they had to be evacuated from the island. There was field hospitals that set up, and but mostly treating for wounds, shrapnel wounds, and so forth. It's hard to explain that there was so much going on, but it was in your own little bivouac area that you knew what was going on there. Each one had his own war, and he knew what the guy right next to him was up to or what he was doing, and he was hoping to count on him and stuff going there. But outside of that, everybody had their own version of what happened. I suppose this is the same thing in any encounter, any engagement. I know we talked to a lot of the guys that were there, same outfits, and they saw something different than you saw, and I saw something different than they did. So it's very difficult to explain that what actually happened. It takes you back, I think, to when you see pictures of the Civil War with the two sides charging each other in mass herds of people. That was not right. That was not the way we did it. That was not true.
Did you ever see the Japanese that often when they were attacking or when you were fighting?
Oh yes, very, very closely. You had hand-to-hand combat. You had guys that were in our own company during the encounters at night. They loved to fight at night. We didn't. We couldn't see the damn thing that good. But there'd be a lot of at night, And we devised all kinds of methods to try to alert us. We'd string little wires with tin cans on them, empty ration cans on them to rattle if they could hear them moving. We had a real good bunch of natives, warriors there that had a terrific sense of smell, and they could smell them. Whether it was a body odor or whether it was something they were using as their equipment or what, we don't know, but they would come through the lines and let us know that they're coming. I remember one night that the force was supposed to be so great coming through, and we had been tipped off ahead of time. The minute that we got the word exactly where they were, we started open fire, and the poor natives didn't have a chance to come through the lines without getting shot at too. You know? And you could hear them screaming and yelling at us. But the natives were a great help. The Japanese there themselves would infiltrate as much as they possibly could. And I remember one morning we'd had a little skirmish, and by the time day broke and you could see what was going on there was one poor little guy was under a Jeep that was parked in the company area. And of course everybody was all ready to kill him, but for some reason or other, he rolled out from under the Jeep, and you could see he was a poor little lamed up civilian, construction worker apparently, and he had been dying of starvation, and he had a can of our sea rations, and he was no idea in the world of how to open the things, and he had been spending all night trying to chew through that tin can. And at this point, you feel sorry for him. On the other side, you hate their guts. We went in, and I think it's a good point to bring it up now that a bunch of kids going in there to fight a war, and you thought that you were supposed to kill the enemy, and they were probably trying to kill you. There was this is a job, and I guess this is what we have to do. But as a morale buster, the Japanese started playing a little dirty, trying to demoralize us. We'd find some of our dead the next morning, badly mutilated with, I don't even want to get into that, but rather than demoralizing the Marines, I think it infuriated them. And at that point, they started to retaliate, and we had developed our own little methods of demoralization. One that stuck in my mind particularly was that they used to take a Japanese soldier, preferably not quite dead, and suspend him between two trees, spread eagle type, and bet how many strokes with a machete it would take to slice him from crotch to the top of his head, so that you ended up with two pieces. That did a pretty good job of demoralizing the Japanese. I think the 8 strokes was the record at that time. Japanese had a girl was she actually an American, but they call her Tokyo Rose. And Tokyo Rose used to broadcast quite frequently. We would receive them through the shortwave radio sets. And after these incidents like this, she got to call us the Mad Butchers of Guadalcanal. And I don't know whether we were proud of it or not, but it's one of the horrors of war, I guess. People don't realize what actually, how vicious or how ruthless a person can get. It's just not in human nature, but that's what happens. The trick is to come back home and forget all that stuff and don't hold it anymore. The other thing I think that should be brought up at this point is how valuable the code talkers were. You've probably heard of the big movie now that's been out and all, but that was not quite up to the truth either, Hollywood style and what have you. We had no idea who they were at first. They didn't know they were infiltrated or working with a group. My encounter with them was that I kept getting tangled up in a jungle of vines. And I kept cutting them with my machete. I was sitting there one afternoon under the jungle rot there, jungle haze and everything else, and these two little fellows come walking up the trail there, hunched over and creeping along the trail, and I said, what are you looking for? And they hold up a wire that they said that they can't understand what's happening to their communication wire. I didn't know the damn camouflage wire was their telephone wire, and they never found out from who it was either. I think this is about all I can contribute to Guadalcanal. When it was totaled up, we went through a little over 100 bombing raids. It was continuing. If you got through 1 day or 2 days at the most, you were very lucky that you didn't get a bombing raid. We ended up a little over 100 bombing raids. I think there was 13 major naval shellings from the sea, both ships and submarines. Numerous artillery fire from the hills around, and a little bit shell-shocked, I guess, when you come out of there. From that point on, we left the canal, and the first weekend in December, and having spent 4 months there, we were ready for rest rehabilitation. We were evacuated from the island. We were transported to Brisbane, Australia, and the living conditions there, I think they thought we were the enemy. We lasted 2 weeks and had to be evacuated from there because of the conditions. And they moved us to Melbourne, Australia, and there were bivouacked there for about 6 months. Melbourne was a real hometown type of people, and the guys will never forget them. In fact, the Australians were getting to the point where the poor guys from New Guinea, that their troops were in New Guinea, they'd come home and pick fights with us because we'd taken all the girlfriends away from them, I guess. But Australia is a beautiful country and quite a place. At that point, we left, I believe it was in August. went up to New Guinea. Uh, we some were in Oral Bay, some were at Milne Bay, some were at Cape Sudeste. And at that point we were not sure what was developing. We knew we were in for another encounter. We ended up, our own group ended up on an island called Good Enough. So they said it was. But it was a jumping off place for Cape Glouster, New Britain. Cape Glouster was another 4 months, and if jungle, wet. Unfortunately, whoever planned it right in the beginning of the monsoon season, and I don't think there was one day on the island that you were dry. It rained continuously. A cup of coffee in your canteen cup lasted all day. The more you sipped, the more it rained, and it just kept never getting low. You can imagine the weather conditions there, that everything rotted continuously. Weapons rusted. We didn't have a band with us. The band equipment rotted out. I don't ever remember too often many skirmishes on the island that my company was involved in. It was more a test of survival, I think, more than it was of the weather than it was of the endurance with the Japanese. We were there another 4 months, and they evacuated us out of there. We ended up in an island called Palau. I'm trying to remember back when there was not very much going on there. It was just a formation of, we were trying to regroup and organize. Shortly after that, the unit ended up in Pelilu in the Palau Islands. We landed September 15th in 1944. I was evacuated with a group at September 29th, 14 days later. Our unit had taken tremendous beatings, and there wasn't enough of us left to do any good for anybody, so they evacuated some of them off that island.
Were you in the first wave then?
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of vessel, landing craft did you use here?
On that one island there, we used LSTs, the old large, slow troop ship. And that was a encounter. I don't think the American public ever heard much of Pelilu, because the disastrous results. It was strictly coral on the beach areas where we landed, and there was you could not dig in. The Japs were well entrenched. They had us drilled in from the moment we hit the beach with mortars and artillery. They ran us up and down the beach there. We were just scared. Had no idea, no place to dig. You could not even dig in this stuff. And trying to get off of the beach into the backside, hillside a little bit of it, was unbelievable. Pelilu should never have happened. Pelilu was a disaster. And yet the American public doesn't know knows very little about it. It accomplished nothing. It had an airport there that was not that great. The Japanese had been there for, I don't know, 20 years or better, and they had dug into the caves and underground caverns all through there. So they were well prepared, well defended. And that was the downfall of all of us. We were, I think the rest of the company lasted, or the rest of the group lasted about a month after that. But we ended up back at Palau, and within a couple of weeks, we were shipped back to the United States. We'd been over there 30 months and had 3 major operations. And we figured that was enough.
Now, I noticed you received a Purple Heart. Where did you receive that?
That was on Pelilu. I didn't even know I'd been wounded until a couple of days after the major landing on the beach. It's hard to explain that everybody has got their own feeling of what do you want to do. Do you want to get out of here? Do you want to stay or what? At that point, I think I was a little wacky anyway, but I decided that those guys here are worse off than I am, so I just didn't, put it in the back of your mind, that's all. And it was never discovered until just before I got evacuated off of it. It was about 2 weeks, like I said, that before you really had to realize that you were getting a problem here. So I got back to the beach at Palau, and there was just medication done to the knee and all that stuff. But outside of that, it never really concerned about it until a year later, after we got home. I think we all joined in our area here, all joined the Marine Corps Reserve, and shortly after that, he got called up for the Korean War. At the Korean War, I went up for physical inspection, and at that time, I believe it was at the Ward of Elite Arsenal, being held responsible for the physicals. And at that point, they discovered there was something wrong with my leg and my knee. I was sent to the VA hospital, and they discovered I had shrapnel under the kneecap, with a piece of bone chipped off. So somewhere about 14 years later, when I received the Purple Heart. But it was the end of my career with the Marine Corps. I had served 4 years, the first enlistment, and 4 years in the reserves till Korea came along.
On your record form, you said we were not allowed to be captured. What does that mean?
Word was out, if you get captured, you're on your own. We're not coming after you. It was kind of a morale booster or morale buster. I'm not sure which. But the Marine Corps, that group encouraged their people that just, you don't get captured, you don't give up, you don't quit. You're out there and that's it. You're individually on your own. Just don't get caught, that's all. It was a slogan they had that they'd like to make a presentation to the troops, trying to encourage them, never give up. I don't know. Something to the effect that glory hunting or whatever you want, but it seemed to work. I know that you go back to Wake Island, poor guys, they had to give up. There was nothing left for them to do. Battalion, Corridor, all this type of thing. It was something to try to keep you interested, keep your morale going.
Did you have any problems adjusting when you got back home?
Yeah, you your nerves were to the point where you were a little jumpy. I remember I woke up one night at home after we were married. I woke up during the night, and my wife found me crawling behind the toilet, trying to dig a foxhole.
Mr. Brundage, we're going to have to stop there.
That we never knew each other was existed in this area. And there was one that, in fact, I gave him your name from Voyageville. His name was Shed, S-H-E-D-D. And we were step by step with the same all the way across the Pacific. And we never knew each other in that type of thing. But there's not too many of us left.
No, unfortunately.
Now, you were telling your story, were there any other reactions that you had to your combat after that, or after that, waking up that one night?
Well, I was working with the Leggett Drug Company in Schenectady, and I remember on the State Street where the concourse or whatever in there, and I was walking across that with the traffic was going by, and this car went by and backfired, and I dove over there, over the railing, right into the line of traffic. You felt like a damn fool when you realized what was happening, but in the meantime, I'm looking for a place to hide here. I think that I don't know, it's hard to explain. To answer your question, I'd say no. I don't think I really had too much of an effect on it. I don't think so.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that you served with?
Oh yes, one of the fellows that was I was with constantly was our best man at a wedding. I have a very good friend down in Louisiana now, one in Boston, one in I think where they moved to. I think the sheriff was after them. They're jumping all over the country. But to answer your question, yes.
Did you join, or do you belong to any veterans organizations?
Back in 1948, a couple, 3 years after the war was over, I was instrumental in getting a bunch of the guys together from all of the outfits, just as long as we were in the Marine Corps, and joined the Marine Corps League. At that time it was a floundering outfit, and in fact, we used to hold our meetings here in the Armory, and we had a pretty active group. We had volunteered to all the parades, and at that time there were a lot of activities going on yet, and we all joined the Marine Corps Reserve. A couple of years after that, when Korea broke out, all of our guys got called back, and I felt like a damn fool because I was the only one that didn't get accepted because of of my knee. And when Korea was over, things just dropped out of sight again. Everybody went their own way. Everybody's trying to make a living, and it wasn't until 1982 that I was approached to try to regroup the group. And at that time we got together with some of the boys, and we had a very strong detachment again in Saratoga. Actually, it was working out of Boston, but it was called the SPA detachment. And it's in effect, it's still in existence today. we took part in all site parades, military ceremonies, and Toys for Tots program, this type of thing. And it still goes today, but as the veterans get older and older, all the organizations are barely having problems with their group. What we got to have is another big war, and everybody will be eligible again. But I didn't feel that I could devote my attention to 4 or 5 different organizations and do none of them any good, where you could concentrate on one and really accomplish something. So to answer your question, I guess, yeah, that's the only one I got involved in, yes.
How do you think your time in combat and service affected your life, changed your life?
I think it made a man of me. I think it made me realize that there's, if you, that's a hell of a question. I think that it makes you an individual of you, that you can take care of yourself, you can take care of your family, more independent, not allowing yourself to be subjected to harassment, belittlement. In other words, I think that can we go to the next question?
That's okay. You have some things to show us that you brought with you?
Yeah, I got a couple of things here.
John, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
The GI Bill rights, I took a radio television course, correspondence course. I got married in April of 1944, several months before the war was over. Wife and I was stationed in the Brooklyn Navy Yard at the time. My wife moved to Brooklyn with me. And so at that point, we were busy trying to figure out if we were going to raise a family or not, and all. And I didn't have time to get involved with any other programs like that. I think back, should I have? But on the other hand, I got 2 fantastic kids, and I'm glad we did it. Mm-hmm. I don't think, no, I didn't take too much advantage of it.
What was your opinion of when you found out that the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan? How did you feel about that at the time?
Fantastic. I know people were saying, well, they shouldn't have done it and they shouldn't have this. I don't think the American public that feels that way, or any of the public that feels that way, realizes what war is like. I don't think that they realized that if that bomb had not have been dropped, it appears that there would have been hundreds of thousands of other people die before the war was over. And it was a case of the United States did not start the war, I don't believe. Japan was poised to defend their country, native country, and in so doing there were going to be many, many casualties according to all statistics. Personally, I think it was great. And anybody that differs with me, with its humanity bit, it sure as hell was not there. It had never been taken part in. Something has to give, and I'm sure if Japan had the opportunity, they would have beat the United States to it. So I was all in favor and still am.
Thank you. That's the thing to show us.
This I just happened to discover the other day. This was, another link was here. This was all hand carved. And it was Mary on one side with my wife's name and Jack was on this side. This was made from the wood, mahogany wood, taken from the rail of the Lever Brothers plantation on Guadalcanal. I don't know what happened to me, but... And the name itself is, they never would tell me what it's made out of, but the guy said that the Jap would never had use for it anymore.
So this was something that was picked up that was from a Japanese soldier or something?
No, a buddy of mine was with me, and he loved to carve.
Oh, okay, so he
So
carved
he carved
that
that
from-
out,
okay.
yeah. This is a little get together of, oh yeah, that's sectioned off into the three battles.
Okay. And that's you taking it to boot camp?
Yes, yes.
Now, are they these photographs that you took, or?
I took a lot of them, and there was a lot of them taken by a photographer friend of mine. His name was Fitzgerald. He worked for the, I think it was the Boston Globe or Boston time. And if you'll pull some of them out, you'll
Okay.
note on the
Well,
back.
we can, Wayne is focusing on each one of them.
Oh,
Okay, maybe you can can you turn that so maybe he can see it and explain some of them?
this is a water crew coming back from the front lines on Guadalcanal. We've been up there several days again. This is a piece of shrapnel landed in the guy's tent there from one of the naval shells. This was our area when the Japanese bombed it, shelled us all night long in October. Our camp was underneath that. This is one of the original MASH setups. That was just a shot of the aircraft on the end of the airport.
How about this one?
This one here was there was a general's son was killed.
There's
And
too much length.
Okay, well, how do you want me to?
Just drop it down a little. Yeah, that's better.
this was one of the old lorries on the Lever Brother plantation. I don't remember whether the old thing worked or not, but those are two of my buddies sitting behind it. That this is a ship burning that was torpedoed on the shore down there. Yeah. Oh, just two of the guys that were. That was a Japanese soldier that had been captured and was being interrogated by a Japanese interpreter on our side. Jap interpreters had a tough time because we thought they were one of them and they thought they were one of ours.
That's good.
That I don't recognize what it's doing. That's the airplane on the edge of the airport. This was taken from a board ship. It was showing some of the naval fire coming in. That's Japanese, wreck of a Japanese zero plane shot down. This is the fence over the Pelilu River where the 900 Japanese were killed one night. They tried to make the landing ashore and were caught in the cross fire of the Marines. This is cleaning up in the river there. I think this was a,
Airport, bunker airport.
oh yeah, that's where they used to pull the airplanes back in to try to keep them from being bombed.
Okay.
That's a bomb crater? No,
Yes.
it was Japanese.
That's a bomb crater too.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm holding this, I'm sorry.
Those are
Oh, and Japanese bombers.
Japanese bombers coming in.
Okay.
That's a little bit of Japanese propaganda. No, I'm sorry. That's a 1 minute exposure of anti-aircraft fire by the 164th Army unit trying to bring down One Lung Louis. They missed him.
Who's that?
That was a local Saratogian named Harry LeBaron, who was a corpsman for the division.
I can't, it's too much. Okay, that's good right there. Okay, got it.
That's another area that was suffering from the naval attack. And another interrogation there.
Okay.
Did you ever capture any Japanese flags?
This is me.
Ah.
This is my buddy. His name is Hance. And
So this is you on this side.
correct.
And what is his name?
Welton, W-E-L-T-O-N, Welton Hance. At that time was from Michigan. We both got our Japanese flags the same day. You notice the writing along the side. The interpreter tells us that they were from a Japanese school teacher, and all the school kids signed it for good luck. It didn't work.
Were you able to bring it back home?
The story behind that is it was framed and given to the Boston Museum, and I was down there the other day. In fact, I wanted to know if we could get it back from them and give it to you people.
Uh-huh.
And the last I knew, there's a formation of paper here somewhere, and it had to be filled out, and they wouldn't give it back, but they would loan it to you for 99 years. So it's in the process of being sent back.
I don't want to ask what these are.
Her name was Rigoli, and the only reason I remember that was because we had a guy in our company named Rigoli, and he swears it's not his sister.
No, these were some of the natives on
Those are some of
Guadalcanal?
the natives, correct. This one here, if I can pull that out of there for you. That's
Here.
American propaganda.
Maybe you should.
Yeah. This was dropped on the Japanese soldiers, trying to get them to give up.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you got that right side up or not.
Yeah, I don't either.
Got it.
This is Cape Glouster, New Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you want to do all these? Or?
Oh, there's not that many more.
Yeah.
Go through them quickly. Okay.
Looks like wherever you were, it was wet. So, well, Pelilu wasn't, was it? Did it?
No, Pelilu wasn't. Pelilu was hot, 115, 112. The thing that amazed us at Pelilu was that I think there's a picture in there somewhere, the Japanese soldiers were chained to their artillery pieces.
Sorry. What were you saying about the Japanese soldiers on
They
Pelilu?
were chained to their artillery pieces so they couldn't run away.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's the airport.
Yeah, here just a few of Pelilu.
Oh, Pelilu, okay. Okay.
Yeah, there were the amphibious tractors by then, weren't there?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
That was where the artillery was, it was over behind that building there.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, I think there's just some.
So I was in Quantico, Virginia, Officers Kennedy School.
Okay.
Some of my buddies down there in Australia.
Now, are you in any of these photographs?
Yeah, this was me here.
Okay.
I'll turn it over.
Right. You gotta hold it down more.
Oops, sorry.
Got it. Which one are you?
In this one?
This is me over here.
Okay.
Yeah, you might find a few pictures of New Zealand and Australia mixed up in there.
And are you in?
This is the company doctor, and this was a company, we call him a runner, I guess it was at that time. That was taken in Melbourne, Australia.
Okay.
If you'll notice on a lot of these pictures, yeah. Am I wasting film?
No, that's all right. I've got plenty.
I'm gonna make a layer on me here. Okay.
Oh, you had him.
The reason for
postcard.
that, the story for that is, when
Okay.
the film were forbidden to be developed in Australia, I don't know whether it was for anti-propaganda or whatever. However, it just so happened that a buddy of mine, girlfriend, father was a photographer and ran a photo shop in the town of Melbourne and did us a favor, but he had to print them as a postcard.
Oh, okay.
So that's where it was on from there. This is the original diary of, it was kept from Quantico on through Guadalcanal. At that point I quit with it.
Oh. You kept it on Guadalcanal?
Pardon?
Did you keep it while you were on Guadalcanal?
Yes, yep. And just for the fun of it, if you got time,
Sure.
Well, I went through this thing one time, and it was getting in such bad shape, I figured I better do something with it, so I tried to put it onto tape. I'll give you just a hair of it.
Engineer Battalion of the 1st Marine Division during World War II. It is my intent to try and convey to anyone interested in how my life was on Guadalcanal during the first 4 months of the operation. Under no circumstances is this story meant to represent all the different battles, engagements, or happenings during this time. Rather, it is my own personal account and observations of a very personal nature. The following is taken from a long, unforgotten diary recently recovered from a musty old memento box. July 30th, 1942. Aboard the USS Hunter Liggett, heading for Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. There's supposed to be several thousand Japs on the island. The engineers would be going ashore as combat troops in the first wave. Expect to arrive Wednesday. We all got another shot today. The gang sure doesn't look too concerned. I think we're all in shock. Attack delayed till Friday. Jap fleet concentration causing problems. We were issued 105 rounds of ammunition and 4 grenades. August the 7th. Down the cargo nets and into the Higgins boats, trying not to throw up our breakfast. We landed this morning and didn't see much activity, except a few Jap figures in the woods, but no opposition. The beach is beautiful. Sand and all that, palm trees, gorgeous. One Jap plane circled the area but left quickly. Lying under a coconut tree, we're waiting for orders. Trigger Happy Marines spot fire during last night. A group got called to build a pontoon bridge for the 1st Marines as they were bogged down on the Lunga River. August the 9th. We moved camp inland a ways. Told Japanese are heading for the hills. We are eating sea rations, but told to conserve. Heard scuttlebutt that the American Navy cargo ships are leaving with most of our supplies. Jap Navy is approaching. Terrific sea battle going on at night. August the 10th. Casualties are not too heavy, and we are told. Night fighting is going on in some areas. Survivors from a sea battle are coming ashore. August the 10th.
Maybe we could, if we could, can we copy this?
Still not too
Have
heavy.
a copy of this?
We are told.
You can have it.
Night fighting is going on in some areas. Survivors from a sea...
Just stood on for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, that would be a great addition.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, good.
Okay. We'll get him a release form for the tape. You've got that, right?
No.
Okay. Let's see if I can get
Oh, yes, this has.
Oh, okay. So this was a great interview, John. Very interesting.
Not for record or anything, I just happened to think of a couple of little incidents that might be of interest to you. On the canal, we more or less had a permanent setup for a camp right on the edge of the airport, and of course the artillery was on one end of the airport, we were on the other end defending the artillery. However, things would be quiet down a little bit, and rather than having to go up at night and off into the woods or someplace to take a leak there or something, The engineers were quite a bunch of engineering people, and they used to receive food rations in square 5-gallon cans. Well, they used to take it, cut them diagonally, and solder them together, I mean, end to end, so you'd have maybe a 4-foot, 5-foot long trough. At the one end, they would run a hole in the side and run the bamboo, which is always hollow, run a bamboo rod into the ground. Well, all you had to do was walk up to the thing, and relieve yourself, and you didn't have to go all the way into the wood. Well, one night this fellow comes walking out of there and walked right up to the trough to relieve himself, and just as he did, a coconut fell out of the tree overhead, right into the trough. Well, he had noticed that the trough had plugged up, backed up, and he was standing there bare-ass naked. We kind of thought it was funny. Several of humorous things like that happens, and that relieves the tension, I guess, and made everything.
I don't have the other form.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought I did. This would be a release form, if you wouldn't mind signing. This is just saying that we can use the audio tape, or the videotape, and that people can come here and use it.
Do you want me to stop this?
Yes, I'm sorry.